All right, let's get this list kicked off. One of my favorite books on the American frontier is Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa. Now, this book is amazing because it's got much detailed history, and it's got so much color and so much life, and I just really like it. I think you guys should read it.
Drake, that's not a book about the frontier.
It's not?
I don't think so.
What have I been reading then? Hi everyone, Drake Pledger with Flintlock Operator. You know, in our own living history and reenactment journey, it's really important for us to do our own research. So I'd like to share with y'all some of the resources, some of the books that have been very helpful and beneficial to me. So let's go ahead and get started down the list. All right, so this first book we're going to talk about is a primary source, and a primary source is a work that somebody that actually witnessed or lived through that history is writing about. So this is the Journal of Nicholas Cresswell. Nicholas Cresswell was a young Englishman who decided to come over to the American colonies right before the American Revolution. And he goes to the Caribbean, he comes back up to Virginia, North Carolina, and eventually makes his way out to Kentucky. So we get a first-hand account of what journeying in the colonies was like, what it was like to sail on all those ships, and what it was like to travel the back countries and back roads of Kentucky back during its very earliest settlements. And it's kind of funny because he just randomly bumps into some of the biggest names in Kentucky history. And with Nicholas Cresswell, you really get the idea of what it was like to live on the frontier at that time. The way he writes about it is it's very real, and it's not all that sterilized. And it's not all that sensationalized either. He writes it as he was feeling it. He writes about his hunger, he writes about his loneliness, he writes about how destitute he is so much of the time, especially when he's out in Kentucky. He writes about the hopes that he has for his fortunes, and he also writes about the devastation that he had whenever he lost some of his fortunes. So this is a really fantastic primary source to be able to go back and reference and read, if not just for fun, to learn what life was like on the frontier in the 18th century. Go check it out, the Journal of Nicholas Cresswell. All right, so this next book we're going to talk about is The Hunters of Kentucky by Ted Franklin Belue. All right, The Hunters of Kentucky by Ted Franklin Belue. Now, Mr. Belue is a boon historian and an expert on the Kentucky frontier. And so he's done years and years of research, but he's also gone out and done a lot of that living history. And that's really reflected in this book. You can tell that he's pouring a lot of his own experiences into the work. So it's a really good combination of a very detailed general history of the history of Kentucky and of the Kentucky frontier, as well as throwing in little spicy bits that really show his own expertise and help us understand what living on the 18th century frontier was like. This book, like I said, is a general history, but he also goes and zooms in on different aspects of frontier Kentucky life and on different characters. So he'll talk about buffalo hunting. He'll talk about the buffalo. He'll talk about the impact of the Indian culture had on the whites, and the white culture, and the impact that the white culture had on the Indians. And one of my favorite things about this book is he has tables and documentation at the end of the appendices of lists that traders had, that trading posts kept in stock, and that's a really good reference for us to be able to go back and see what was being traded, what was being bought, and what was being used on the frontier. The Hunters of Kentucky by Ted Franklin Belue. It's a great book. Go ahead and check it out. All right, this last book we're going to look at is actually not a book on the history of the Kentucky frontier, or a history book at all. It's Camping in Woodcraft by Horace Kephart. And Horace Kephart was a woodsman and outdoorsman extraordinaire back during the late 19th and early 20th century. And although this doesn't have the exact practices that the long hunters and the hunters and the frontiersmen would have had on the Kentucky frontier, it does give us a glimpse into the mindset and some of the woods practices and woodcraft that the woodsmen of the 18th century would have had. We don't really know a lot of what the 18th century woodsmen and frontiersmen, how they did stuff in the woods. I mean, we have conjecture, we have research, we have a lot of living history done, but for getting a lot of practical information on how to process wood, how to build fires, what foods to take, how to pack your clothing, this is a really fantastic work, and it's still relevant today for modern camping. And since he was writing this about 120 years ago, that puts this book right smack in the middle between our era and the era of the Kentucky frontier. So you have a really great mix of some camping practices that are trending towards more modern mentality, and you also have some very traditional woodcraft and bushcrafting skills that Kephart puts forward in this book. So if you just want a fantastic book on camping and traditional woodcraft, this is my favorite book for that and favorite resource. And if you want a book that's going to help give you a good blueprint of good woods practices in general and some of the practices that the 18th century frontiersmen would have been using, this is an amazing resource. All right, everyone, that was only 3 books, and there's so many more resources that I'd love to be able to share with y'all. And so those will hopefully be coming in future videos. In the meantime, let me know. I'd love to hear from y'all in the comments about what resources have been useful to y'all and which ones you think would be useful to me. I'd be more than happy to hear your suggestions in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps me so much. And my name is Drake Pledger. You're watching Flintlock Operator, and we'll see you down the trail in the next video. All right, pro tip, guys. Buckle shoes are not good things for climbing trees in. All right, how's this look? Ooh.